To our speaker, John Gomez, who started hacking back in high school.
Thank you. All right, let's just start with a video.
You're really into computers, huh?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Diving into the school computer. They change the password every couple of weeks, but I know where they write it down.
Those are grades?
Yeah. I don't think that I deserve that. Do you?
You can't do that.
Already done. Give me more listen.
Okay, Catherine. These are my grades.
How can anybody get a D in home ec?
Well, that's none of your business. Can you erase this,
No,
please?
do it.
What are you doing?
I'm changing your biology grade.
No, I don't want you to do that. You're going to get in trouble.
No, nobody can find out. There, you just got a C. Now you don't have to go to summer school.
Change it back.
What? It can't possibly.
I said change it back.
Okay, okay.
I guess I better get going.
Thanks for the ride.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
So that was very close to the first hack I actually ever did. I didn't change grades, but I did get to the attendance records and some other things. So I'm John, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer for a company called Sensato. We do a lot of cybersecurity work, and both on the physical. We also do physical side security. So I'm going to talk a few things that are off script, and then we'll get into the actual meat of the presentation. So a couple of things I hear over and over, like, you know, we're in the process of convergence of cyber and physical, and those things are coming together. Let me be very clear about this. They're coming together for you. You guys are behind the times. For the attackers, cyber physical is one now. And I'm going to give you two examples of things we just did in the past few months that hopefully will illustrate this point. The first one is we were asked by a client to physically penetrate a facility in Ireland, a very high-risk facility they have. And so it was a physical penetration. They have extremely good security, both physical, roving, human. So where do you think we started our penetration of that facility? Right? The objective is physical penetration, but we started in the cyber realm. Because as the attackers, we know that there's a variety of open source intelligence that we can garner that will help us in terms of how do we attack that facility. And in that facility, what was really interesting is they had a lot of partners, construction partners, and we see this pattern repeated time and time again. And the partners took photos of all the great work they had done in building this facility. Everything from the bathroom toilets, and you know, one partner did all the bathroom and restroom work, and they posted all the great tile work they did, to the other partners who put together really awesome 4K video of the industrial control systems and the screens and the model numbers of everything in the facility. The security contractors, they put together really cool, you know, pictures of all the camera work they did, all of their intrusion detection systems for physical. And so we basically had the entire story of how it all came together because their partners put all this on their websites, because these are smaller contractors, and they were trying to find ways to garner, you know, credibility for themselves. And what better way than to show and demonstrate that, hey, we did this work for this multinational company. Well, the only issue with that is you have people like me and my team who then look at that and start to help us develop our attack plans and our attack models. The reason I'm telling you that is because that is a our job was physical, but we use cyber. So cyber physical for an attacker is here and now. The second example I'll give you is a different organization who asked us to help convince their executives that they really did need physical security in terms of drivers and some of the things that were spoken about in the last presentation. And one of the pieces of advice I'll give you is you have all the information you need to convince somebody that they need to take security a little more serious. I just think we don't use it. So I'll give you an example of what we did. One of the executives who was the chief compliance officer of this organization was actually the most resistive to having a physical security team or physical security capability and things placed into their home. And so they were going on vacation, and we targeted her. We decided, well, we're going to take her. We were allowed to interact or take anybody on the executive team. And so what we did is we realized and found that she was going on vacation. When she went on vacation, she went with her 2 kids and her husband. And the vacation included going to London, Morocco, and France. So as she was doing this, she kept posting photos to Facebook. About 2 weeks before the vacation, we had somebody create a fake profile and friended her on Facebook. So we were able to get pictures, all the pictures that she uploaded. Each of those pictures we were able to figure out the geotags and geolocations for. We were able then to determine, basically because of the amount of pictures and a few other things, where they were staying, how they were moving around the city, what their agenda was relatively. And so we took all those photos, and this is what I'm kind of trying to get across to you, is you have this information to you. It's not this hard to pull off this kind of a threat intelligence campaign. And what we did is we printed out all the photos, where they were taken, the location. We drew circles around their kids' heads, and then we put everything into a manila envelope and left it on her desk, so when she came back from the vacation, the very first thing she would see is these photos, with a little note that said, "We could have taken you at any time, at any place during your vacation. Welcome to the real world." Right? So you have that, and you could do this in different ways, and I'm happy to talk about it. One other example is, looking at things like your, you can easily, a lot of people talk about, well, from a physical perspective, protecting somebody at home. But the biggest vector you have at home is their social media, right? You can put cameras in the house, panic rooms, panic buttons, roving security, give them a dog, whatever you want to do, but they're going to go onto a social media environment. And the moment they do that, they've weakened your physical security. Right? I often give the example of an employee that goes home and says, I'm so upset, or usually it's more colorful language, that I have to work this weekend, and because we have to once again upgrade the firewall because it's got an issue, right? Well, okay, great, you just announced that you have to upgrade the firewall. But the same thing happens with, I'm sick and tired of working because these cameras, keep going out. Or they keep propping open this door even though I tell them 1,000 times not to. I'm so frustrated with my coworkers, right? Those information leaks are really where this convergence is starting to occur. So if you don't think cyber and physical have come together, you're just not looking at it from an attacker's perspective. You're looking at it from your perspective, and that's the most dangerous thing you can do. So in this presentation, what I'm going to do is a little different than what I've done the last 2 years. We're going to look at movies, which is why I put the first clip in. And we're just going to watch the movies. The first one, actually, we didn't plan this when we were asked to come speak here, but you'll understand why in a moment. And then we're going to talk about, could this clip actually occur? Could this actually happen? In real life, is this just Hollywood kind of vision, or can we see these things occur today? So let's talk about attacking traffic systems.
Welcome to LA's Automated Traffic Surveillance and Control Operations Center. See, they use video feeds from intersections and specifically designed algorithms to predict traffic conditions and thereby control traffic lights. So all I did was come up with my own kick-ass algorithm to sneak in, and now we own the place. You want to do a driver? I'll talk to you never. See red light, green light.
Dennis?
Yeah.
What's up with grid 34?
Let's check it out. Oh, oops, did I? Oops. Wow, but it's awesome. Is that not awesome? Change it back? Yeah.
Lights are working fine. Just an accident.
So that is an example of convergence of cyber and physical, and pretty much every clip we see today will be that convergence. Now, the issue is most people say, well, you know, that was a cyber attack. That's outside the purview of the physical, but this is a cyber attack that impacted the physical world. And the reason that nobody will discover this is because the people responsible for the physical side of the house don't have any insight into the anomalies that the cyber side has. And one of the big things you really got to start thinking about is how do you bring those worlds together? Because, and that's hard, politically and for a bunch of reasons, it's difficult, but you're almost at a point, and I would suspect within 3 years, there will be no way not to have these things come together, right? It's just too difficult to keep them separated. So can this actually happen? Well, the answer is yes, right? People actually were inspired by the movie and went out and actually hacked traffic lights in Los Angeles, which is where the movie focuses its attention here. Now, interestingly, when we talk about attacker's perspective and attacker psychology, you know, they're actually pretty well. This is actually a master's PhD thesis on how do you break into traffic control systems. So the information's out there, and it's not that hard to get, and it's not that hard to replicate. So you could look this up. It's public information. There's no classification to it, and it takes you through in very strong detail exactly how to put together an attack against traffic control systems. And I suspect this would work in any major city in terms of how this occurs. And again, this is, again, we don't bring these worlds together, right? I talk to city and government IT security teams, and I'll ask them, well, who's managing the traffic control system? And say, well, that's not our issue, that's the Department of Transportation, or that's somebody else. Well, how can it not be? I mean, these things are using IP. Everything in this room probably has an IP addressable interface. It is cyber, and it's protecting physical. You have to have those two worlds together. This is actually very interesting. Now, the gentleman you're going to see in this is actually a world-famous hacker. I believe he's been arrested by now, but I'm not sure. This takes place in Europe.
We staan hier in de file, uiteraard. Ik kan niet anders verwachten. Maar de laatste keer met NS vermijd ik hier de trein. Ik heb hier een live verbinding met de verkeersinstallatie van de ANWB. Gaat via een open channel. En daarmee kan dus de verkeersborden beïnvloeden. Dus er staan nu 50. Maar hij moet nog heel hard staan. Ik ben er niet blij mee. Dus ik zal een beetje blijven maken. Smiley. Als je daar niet uit de auto staan we langs de snelweg. Die hebben de matrix worden gezien. Maar jullie kunnen ook meer teksten kwijt. Ik denk dat ik toch wel een schouderklopje verdiend heb. Gaan we even wat vol doen. Het leukste is dat mijn foto op zo'n bord terecht komt. Dat ben ik. Ja, hier. Dat hier.
So when I say it's here, it's here. This is happening. This is actually about, I think, 2 years ago. So, you know, it's occurring. And the security of this stuff, whether it's, you know, from the physical perspective or the cyber, you know, has to blend because it's a cooperative in order to support this kind of stuff, especially when we get into things like incident response. And these are kind of silly little examples. The train example he gives, in the very beginning of the clip, he says, ever since the Dutch train incident, I stay away from the train. Well, that's because he hacked the train system. Now, he didn't just hack, and we'll see some of this in a little bit, he actually altered the trains. He took over the trains and actually changed the tracks and did a whole bunch of things. When he did that one, he did it accidentally, but it happened. So what about hacker parties? Let's take a look at those, and what are they?
Welcome to the collectors, the very best of the very best. You said you want to try. Let's prove it. Olivia, sit. Okay. Hurry. Freddy is my best programmer. If you can prove your skills up against him, then you have the job. But if you fail, you might not be so fortunate.
So, good old-fashioned hack off, huh? Great, perfect. I'm just gonna take a moment to get prepared if you don't mind. Oh, once you have bottle hour, you just can't go back to any other Chardonnay. Who are you? Well, I've been out of the game for a little while, but you used to call me the Piranha.
No way.
Let's do this, huh?
Okay. The first person that hacks is the Federal Reserve and transfers 1 penny into secure account, please. Are we clear? Again! Freddy is an expert at subverting complex security systems. He is the reason our own system is so secure.
Oh, yeah, I can tell. You did a great job.
That's my name.
You seem to know your way around the computer.
Oh, I'm sorry, we're still talking. I'm kind of busy. You know what? You actually have a little hiccup there at the bottom of your page. A compiler can't optimize the value away like that. There you go. Look, just have to turn that one. Oh, I'm losing. We better get back to work. I forgot something. I'm really good at this.
Chuck, I have the device. Let's get out of here.
Thanks for that help. Hope you enjoyed losing.
Done.
1 penny transferred out of the Federal Reserve into a secure account. Easy.
A little too easy, if you ask me. And honestly, who wants a penny? So, I hacked into the buy more and got us all flat screens. With extended warranties, I might.
You are clearly very good. Unfortunately, I don't care that you are talented. We have all the flat screens that we need.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Before you use that, I've got a little business tip for you. You should really look into finding a better security expert.
So, do those kind of parties and competitions occur? Yeah, they do. So these are actual photos from DEF CON. DEF CON is a hacker event that occurs every year in Las Vegas. It's grown from a couple hundred people to now several thousand. It's actually a takeover of most of Las Vegas. And within it, there are what are called hacker parties or hackathons. And people come together and attempt to break into different things. Now, usually it's pretty benign because they set up some servers and other infrastructure within that environment. But we also know of underground hacker parties that occur in probably every city across the country where people come together and attempt to break into real things. Now, one of the other things we're seeing here is from a cyber criminal perspective, especially in European countries, is the incentives that go through with this. Right, where cyber criminal organizations that are extremely sophisticated, have HR departments, and have a variety of different groups will actually pay incentives. And I've given examples of incentives of the past. The incentives can be everything from a 7-day vacation in the Maldives to a Ferrari to whatever, a couple $100,000 or more. The Ferrari is the most enticing incentive we've seen in terms of somebody giving an incentive to hackers. But now we have hacking as a service. We've got malware as a service. There's something that just came out yesterday afternoon where you can sign up for a new malware as a service and do it for $200 a month. Basically, they manage the platform. They manage everything. You just tell them where you want to point the attack, and it will go out and they will focus the attack in those areas, and then you split the bounties of whatever the proceeds are. But these are, so that gives you an example that those things are real. So So what about industrial systems? We hear a lot about that. Many of you may be involved in protecting those systems, but for the most part, you may have not ever come across kind of a challenge. So I'll give you a little, this has a little bit of racy language, but being the industry we're in, I don't think it'll offend anybody, but.
If I try to gain access, it changes. So solving a Rubik's Cube is fine, isn't it?
Stop. Go in. Ramberg Road. It's an old tube station on the Metropolitan line. Been closed for years. This man was a key. Look at the map. It's London. Subterranean London. What's going on? Why are the doors open?
Can someone tell me how the hell you got into our system?
Still the same. I don't know what they're doing, but they only got 2 minutes left.
So are these kind of things real? And one thing I will tell you, it's never that dramatic where all the screens are popping up in your face. It just doesn't work that way, especially when you're never going to have something like system breached. But this is a pretty interesting example of an actual attack that took place, which you may or may not be familiar with.
Почали надходити дзвінки з різних частин області від наших енергодиспетчерів районів. Це було несподіванкою, так як ці частини між собою енергетично з'єднані. Це щось відбулося незвичайно. Коли ми подивилися на наші комп'ютери, то побачили, що курсори мишок самі рухаються, хаотично рухаються по різних підстанціях, і вони вимикають вимикачі, вимикають лінії, трансформатори. Що робити? Отримали підтвердження, що є зовнішнє втручання, і в телефонному режимі дали команди диспетчерам, щоб вони на місці направили бригади, звичайних електромонтерів, які підстанції, щоб повторно увімкнути лінію. Того дня було знеструмлено десь 200 тисяч населення нашої області.
So I just want to point out a couple things in there. This is, it's a combination cyber-physical, but one of the wackiest things to me in that video is that they say, well, we saw the mouse pointer moving by itself randomly on the screen and disconnecting power from substations. You would think at that moment they would have said, we're under attack, but they just actually dispatched people to go turn the power back on and didn't report the anomaly. And this, again, is kind of an example of security awareness training and making sure that, you have physical operators here monitoring an environment, but they're not making the connection to cyber, and vice versa, or that cyber could be used to carry out a physical. So this is a video that was actually put together by Department of Homeland Security with a university because there was a lot of discussion about could you actually get to the point of really causing damage if you hit a industrial control system. So this is a generator that runs inside of an industrial control center. The security was breached, and and then eventually you'll see what occurs to the generator. So eventually there's a combustion that's not shown on the video. Unfortunately, that video leaked, and some attackers decided to see if they could actually do this. And they did. They carried out an attack. And this one's a little more dramatic. Now, on this one, I will tell you that there was a physical breach before the cyber attack, meaning that the physical security failed, allowing the attackers to gain access to this location and deploy a controller that they could remotely manage. And that's how this occurred. So you, again, have this concept of physical and cyber coming together. So the video here is from a closed-circuit TV. There's no sound, unfortunately, because it's just the CCTV system. So that's the end of the aftermath of what occurred. So thankfully in this one, there was nobody that was hurt, but you can see the damage that occurs from this. And again, these are the kind of things, depending on the industry and the businesses that you're supporting, I think are important to illustrate. And some of you say, well, I'm in a school system, I don't have to worry about that. A lot of schools have boilers, right? It'd be an easy way to take out a school, right? If you represent a hospital, you got cryogenic machines that support MRIs and CT scans, and you probably have boilers. This was a boiler that blew up, and because it blew up, it went flying 30 meters, I think, of what the distance was. So how many of you took BART or used BART? Nobody? MARTA, oh, you guys are MARTA. I'm thinking Bay Area Rapid Transit. Yeah, MARTA. How many of you guys use MARTA? You used it to get here today? Anybody? No? Yes? Probably not going to want to do that.
This is the controller that can control the train systems. So if I press the buttons, it will start the train, or speed up the train, or reverse the direction of the train. And also, I can just stop the train. So this is the controller, and from now on, I'm gonna capture all the radio frequency signals with this HEC-R1. So, okay, here is the code that I'm gonna capture all the signals between this controller and the train. So it just starts capturing all the signals, and I put the buttons like speed up, speed down, or reverse and speed up, and then stop, and then go. So for this moment, I'm gonna put this controller on the desk. So I'm not gonna touch this controller, and just to make sure, I'm gonna turn off the controller, and then I'm gonna replay all the captured signals from now on. Then it should be, the train should be moving some upward. So it starts to replay the signals, and the train is moving upward. So this is how to capture all the radio frequency signals between the controller and the train, and then replay all the signals, the captured signals again, so that I could control the train whatever I want.
So just to explain what you just saw, basically what happens with trains is a lot of the signals go over an RF frequency, right, a radio. And so what the attackers did in this situation is they recorded the radio transmission, right, which is not encrypted and in the open air. So it's not hard to do. You could sit in your car and do this. They then, when they recorded those signals, they wrote a program that allows those signals to be replayed. on their command. And so what they can do is stop the manual control if you have an automated train, and then replay that and take over the train just using the airwaves. So there's no need here for there to be a hardwired or network in place. This is just all radio frequency. And there are a lot of things that work on radio frequency, and radio frequency hacking is a real serious vector. It not only supports things like trains, but industrial control systems, a lot of access control systems, and other things support radio frequency. So net, if you're at MARTA, you probably want to be on the phone calling your IT security team and saying, how are we protecting ourselves from an RF attack? Because they're actually quite easy to pull off. There's very little you can do to stop it because of the fact that you're using public airwaves to transmit those. All right, so let's switch a little bit and talk about attacks that actually, these kind of involve a physical component, but where the focus is more on the actual physical and how these work.
I know it's late, so I'll skip the pleasantries and hand things over to our chairman, Richard Mackey.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Claire. Tonight, I am pleased to announce that NCOM's last fiscal year was our most profitable ever. Yes. At midnight tonight, the 12th version of our flagship operating system will hit the shelves around the world. Sure comes as no surprise who we have to thank. The head of our software design team, a man whose father's own notable history with NCOM helped make this company what it is today. Edward Dillinger. Well done. We will be making our debut on Tokyo's Nikkei Index. NCOM stock will now trade around the world 24/7. Excuse me. Yes, Alan.
Given the prices we charge to students and schools, what sort of improvements have been made in Flynn? Income, OS 12.
And this year we put a 12 on the box.
OS 12 is the most secure operating system ever released.
The idea of sharing our software or giving it away for free disappeared with Kevin Flynn. Okay, if there are no more questions, I would like to meet our next blockbuster. NCOM OS 12. Whoa. Still a few bugs.
So as you can see, that kind of led to, a bad, interesting moment in the movie for those people. But how, actual attacks of this nature occur? How do they actually happen? So this is a little clip that is actually based on some real work, which I think you'll find kind of interesting. And it also incorporates a lot of the physical side of the world and some things that you may or may not be thinking about.
Hey, you got the others?
What's that?
I got the data on this attack.
How bad?
It's bad. I mean, these guys were pros.
Well, how big are you?
I mean, using pretty much every trick in the book. Phishing emails for starters. I mean, Jessica doesn't give up the password on the first try. And Clark and Christina were next. They got about 60% more staff, basically. I mean, to be fair, the phishing site looked extremely legit.
This is not good.
Yeah, well, that's not even half of it. Looks like they scouted the building last Tuesday. They were war driving, looking for any wireless access points. And then they pretty much just walked right in. They cloned an ID badge, they somehow got a key code, and then from that point it was easy. They set the wrong wireless point in the meeting. And then they go over to the server closet and install a sniffer on the network. They even planted key lockers on people's PCs. It's a device that you can record anything an employee types in. They got logins, passwords. They also bugged 3 meeting rooms, and there's one in here.
All right, so what's the damage?
So these attacks actually, about 3 months ago, we saw these carried out in New Jersey against 2 telecoms. They had gone on for about 6 months. They were physical. They did pretty much exactly what was done here. They got in, they went in multiple times. Each time they went in, they deployed an entire laptop to the network at an empty cube in the facility. And these are major telecoms, probably their household names. So the security there is really strong. So this concept of kind of getting in and then tapping to the network and having that laptop record information or send it back to a command and control center is becoming more prevalent. And what's interesting is because cyber and physical are not brought together, there's this kind of large gap in the middle where people don't think these things happen. Everybody's thinking, well, cyber means, you know, coming in through the firewall or breaching the network or phishing attacks or whatever it may be, or ransomware. But we're not thinking about the fact that often, you know, attackers will use physical means to get in and plant their devices and take control of the network. Because once you're on the network, once you're connected, you pretty much have free roam to see every packet, every piece of information on that network, so the return is extremely high. The attackers in the situation in New Jersey were actually funded out of China, and they found the people through a hacker party. They just said, you know, we'll pay somewhere in the neighborhood of $250,000 if you guys can pull this off. And it was just a bunch of people that decided, well, we can do this, and they did. Another thing is thinking about how well your physical security teams understands the tactics and the procedures that are used, the TTP, of the cyber world. So in here you saw war driving, right, which is where somebody just sits out in your parking lot and begins gathering data, right? That's a physical security problem. Your IT security is not going to know that is occurring. They're just not. There's no tool to do that. So physical security needs to understand that, you know, this is an option, this is something going on, and they need to be aware of it and what signs to look for. Because somebody with a map saying, oh, we just got lost, you know, we just pulled in your parking lot, I'm really, really sorry, you know, but there's something sitting on the seat with 3 or 4 antennas connected to it, it's probably something that's a huge tip-off that something's going on. And if the person says, oh, we travel all over the country, so we just use this to keep our satellite connection so we can have wireless and watch movies as we drive, you need to know those signs. You can't just say, well, that's physical security and, oh, the person just got lost. You probably are being set up for an attack. So again, the melding of those worlds is really, really important. I'm going to skip this one, and we'll go on to this one. This device takeover, this is an interesting, kind of cool little thing.
Show the binary imagery that's connected to your report. I believe it is somewhat premature to reveal these images to the general public at this time.
Colonel, I understand, and if you could just narrate those for us, we'd be very grateful.
Intelligence suggests that the devices seen in these photos are in fact attempts at making manned copies of Mr. Stark's suit. This has been corroborated by our allies and local intelligence on the ground, indicating that these suits are quite possibly at this moment operational.
Hold on a second, bro.
Oh, boy, good. I can get your screens. I need a little transparency. No, let's see what's really going on.
What is he doing?
If you'll direct your attention to said screens, I believe that's North Korea.
So, can that be carried out? Let's return back to our little Dutch friend and see what he can do.
Staat in SSL. Heb je een mobieltje bij met supersnelle internetverbinding. En straks probeer je verbinding te krijgen met het netwerk van klonen. Dan zie je een hele mooie VXC maken. Ik wil straks een livestream verbinding maken. Dat je live beelden kan overbrengen op het systeem. Verbinding.
So again, you know, cyber, physical, and you can think about the ramifications. You know, this isn't that hard to pull off. And you think about major sporting events, you think about directional signage, information signage that's critical to a business. Airlines come to mind, somebody taking over the gate passenger information or the arrival departure boards. Those are easy to do. This was done at the train station. Chances are he could have pulled off that attack from anywhere and gotten to it. So thinking about that, we did a breach for a casino in New Jersey, in Atlantic City, early part of last year, where we tried to replicate, could we intercept the video feed and recreate a video feed in a CCTV system? And we were able to do that. And I didn't put the clip in here, but there's movies of where, you know, the attacker comes in and all the security monitoring team sees is a blank hallway. Was there a way to do that? And the answer is yes. You can easily do that and interrupt the feed and just show the hallway even though people are walking in front of the camera. So just how do you harden these systems? How do you, from a physical security perspective, are you doing penetration testing and security risk assessments and vulnerability assessments on the actual equipment that is trying to protect you from a physical security perspective? So the camera takeover, I'm not going to show this, but I'll explain it. This is a clip from the movie Snowden. And there was actually a tool that was leaked by the NSA which allows you to take over cameras. And we often hear about it, but you know, I wanted to kind of show you a couple examples. So these are actual hacks. This is a hack of a video camera for a school system. So in that video, there's something I find kind of disturbing. One is that you have a cyber attack that's taken over a camera and announcing an emergency broadcast system message. In this case, kind of silly that there's a nuclear attack that has taken out Boston and a bunch of other cities. But what's kind of interesting to me is that the teachers or the facility staff don't remove the children from that room, right? And probably didn't do anything to shut, this video goes on for a good 20 minutes and wasn't shut down. Now, to me, that's an example of a failed physical protocol, right? You have a cyber attack, but the physical side of the world doesn't know what to do because they're physical, they're not cyber. And again, like I started this presentation, we're the ones behind the times, not the attackers, right? You gotta think about if there's a cyber attack like this, what is your physical response? The IT security team may or may not do something. In a school system, you may not even have an IT security team. But you know, and you could see the attacker had full control. He pans and moves the camera. This one I put in because it's kind of funny. I won't show you the whole thing because it just takes too long and I want to be respectful of time. This one, the attacker took over a home camera. And I think it's funny, and some of you may not. But what happens is it's late at night. He takes over, or she takes over the camera and plays the sound of AK-47 gunfire through the camera. So the homeowner gets up at night, and so what you're hearing is the AK-47. Now, why you would stand in front of a window when you're hearing AK-47 gunfire, not sure, but it is a homeowner and they're probably not trained on what to do. Now, he does grab his handgun at some point in the video, loads his handgun. So this goes on for quite a bit of time, so I'm not going to force you to watch the whole thing. But the important point there is that, again, taking over cameras and what is the physical response? What is that physical protocol? How does that work? What do you do about it? How do you bring those worlds together? You need to take active steps. And again, it is challenging because of the fact that you have politics involved. The IT security team reports to the CIO, and the CIO, which is kind of weird in and of itself, but whatever. The CIO wants to maintain control of IT security, but yet now you have this physical security side. And so who runs that? And probably the best, we've seen a few GSOC models that work really, really, really well. The one thing I will tell you to dovetail on the presentation that preceded me is adding either cyber questions or physical questions into your assessments makes a lot of sense. Make sure that your assessments are asking from both sides, both sides of that world for now, and see if that helps to start bring things together. So with that, I'm happy to take questions or boos or whatever works for you.
We'll definitely make sure that you have a short break, but we purposely built in this 30-minute cushion so that you can pose a few questions. Let's do that for about 10 minutes. We've got mic roamers right there. Raise your hand if you have a question for John. Right there in the middle. And continue to raise your hand so we can get you a mic so we can go person to person. So raise your hand and capture somebody. Eric, right over there. Good.
Yes, thank you. This is not a setup, but I just got an Amazon security alert that my Amazon account was logged in from Virginia. And I went through the protocol and hit no, it wasn't me. And Amazon came back and said, we will disconnect the shop. And it was from a Motorola Z phone from Illinois. So how does that work?
Yeah, so I would, if you haven't already, I wouldn't respond to that email or click on any links in that email. I would tell you to go to your Amazon account, change the password there if it is, but Amazon typically won't disconnect an account based on a security issue. If you did reply to that, if you did it off your phone, it's probably not too big a deal, but I would just delete the message, log into Amazon directly, and change your password there. And Amazon also has, I believe, dual-factor authentication you can turn on, and I would turn that on there. But chances are those emails, when you get them from anybody, Amazon, FedEx, UPS, whoever it is, saying, oh, we've noticed there's a security issue with your account, please click here to fix it or to address it. Don't click there. Don't do anything but delete it and go to the account how you normally would go to, because there's a very good chance, even if it looks legit, that it's not legit and it's an attacker attempting to gain your credentials.
Good advice. We see more and more of those kinds of things now. Eric?
John, this is totally on a lighter side. I would just like to know, what are the dynamics during one of your staff meetings? Because every year you come with all these vignettes, and I'm just wondering who's around the table and what goes on during your staff meetings.
Yeah, we do actually have calls every day at 9:30. I didn't do the days. And the entire team gets together. We figure out what we're going to do for the next 24 hours. We run everything on a 24-hour clock. And it's a variety of different people, from marketing to our software engineers. We have our own security platform that does real-time intrusion detection and a bunch of other things. We also have our security operations center personnel are there. They give us a briefing of the last 24 hours, what threats they've seen, what alarms, what they're monitoring and seeing. We we interface with FDA and Department of Homeland Security and a bunch of others, so all that information comes in overnight. And then there's there's the attacker side of the world, which is, people that one of the co-founders of Anonymous and a bunch of other people that come out of 3L-letter agencies. And so that's kind of the dynamics. So it's a fun dynamics. I mean, I love what I do. I'm assuming you all love what you do. It's probably more frustrating for you because you have to deal with the executives and the politics, but it's a good time every day. So.
We have one more question there.
John, I was just curious if you had a source of current information for cybersecurity events that people might be in need of knowing about.
Yeah, so Black Hat's a good one to go to. RSA is coming up, though it's become very commercialized. DEF CON, if you really want an eye-opening experience about what goes on, go to DEF CON. Besides the fact it's in Vegas, it is really, but be prepared, it's a crazy, crazy, crazy event, but those are good. There's also meetups, local meetups you can just search for. That Atlanta has a very thriving cybersecurity black and white hat kind of, I hate using those terms, but good and bad. So those kind of things, all those are probably good resources to check out.
John, good morning. One concern that I have, and it's, as we're talking physical and cybersecurity, right? The end user, well, I think the number the other day was only 38% of the end users are actually preparing for a ransomware or cybersecurity attack. So they haven't been educated yet. They've seen movies, but it'll never happen to me concept. Many of us in this room are looking at cybersecurity today going, this is key, right? I'm gonna pick on Genetech right now. They're UL listed for 29-2-3 UL certification for cybersecurity. They see the writing on the wall, many of the other ones do. My look is the guys that are implementing this, right? If you've got a physical security guy coming in and saying, here's a risk assessment, here's what you need to do, but you don't have anybody that knows how to implement it, right? If you're providing a turnkey solution to a customer, right? And I'm gonna pick with GC&E, thank you for the summit today. These guys are installers, but if they're not the guys if your consultant isn't involved or if a consultant didn't do what they were supposed to do, these guys go to install it and they say, we have no idea what cybersecurity is or does. They may be better than most. You've got companies like Sensato that probably aren't getting involved with this. And so who's deploying this cybersecurity concept if the end user says, okay, I need cybersecurity, I don't know how to deploy it, and my physical guy says, I don't know what this cybersecurity is, I'm barely knowing what cloud is, if I'm picking on some of the other integrators that are in the world today, you've got a big open hole with no answers for how to build that cybersecurity into your physical program today.
So, yeah, and we've never met before, right? So, all right, so the reason I say that is because I think the future from a business perspective is that cyber and physical organizations will need to come together and provide that holistic, here's the end-to-end. And we're seeing that when you see GSOCs, when you see fusion centers, but these are bigger, large companies are doing that, right? And there's gotta be a solution that can be driven down to kind of, the lower middle tier of the equation. But you're absolutely right. There is, I know of, no one single entity that is bringing together the entire end-to-end solution. And some organizations on the physical have little things they do. And even our side, like we do physical assessments, but they're probably nowhere near as sophisticated as a dedicated physical assessment. And we're not the right guys to bring in and say, what's the right CCTV and intrusion detection? So you're absolutely right. I think that is the future. I think, that coming together is something that has to happen. And it's just who are the right partners to bring together. So, I'm happy to talk about that, Dan. So.
John, when Dennis asked you to come back here for the third time and talk to us, I believe he told you to scare the living lights out of us, and I think you've done that. Has he done that?
I have one more thing.
Yes,
go ahead. Yeah, I just remembered this because this is actually a pretty serious situation. It is just developing. It's just started last Friday. So there's a new thing out called Swentooth. Don't worry about the naming, but the net of it is it's an attack against Bluetooth. And so what it does is allow anybody to crash or create a denial of service attack against Bluetooth-enabled devices. Now, people are scrambling to fix it. The real serious side of this attack is that it affects medical devices like implantable and pacemakers and things of that nature. But you probably have Bluetooth being used in your environments. And so you really need to think about where is Bluetooth being used. and then talk to that manufacturer and see if they're aware of this new vulnerability, because it's a pretty serious one. It can bypass security, it can crash the device, and it can allow escalation of privileges, which is where an attacker can take over the device completely. So I wanted to mention it, because if you are relying on Bluetooth, and some of you are for critical systems, you need to know about it, and it just started on Friday. So
Thank you for keeping us current. John Gomez, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Jim, Dennis, come on out. Whew. You know, as he was doing this presentation, I was thinking to myself, job security for you. And number two, I think some of you are thinking, I need to have my boss or my 2 or 3 up come to a presentation like this so that they will listen to your recommendations. We'll take a break, and we will restart in 15 minutes at 11:30. Take a break and visit with our vendors. Thank you.